Hey guys, this is Mrs. Dot at Byron Nelson High School, and I wanted to speak to you guys about a graphic organizer that you can use during the AP exam in order to annotate and take notes and plan your rhetorical analysis essay for your actual test in May. And so this is a graphic organizer that some of you may have seen before, and for some of you it may be brand new, but it's based off Tim Freitas's models for thesis, statement, and body paragraph writing. So this will kind of help you frame your thesis and essay the way we've been talking about them the last couple of weeks. In order to show you guys this model, we're going to be using the JFK speech that you guys have been working with for the last few weeks. And I have an annotated copy of it over here, and I'll kind of be flipping back and forth between the two. In order to start, I want to review the prompt briefly. I know you guys have read it, but I want to go over that because this is where we're going to get a lot of the information that we need. On April 10th, 1962, as the United States was emerging from a recession, the nation's largest steel companies raised steel prices by 3.5%. President John F. Kennedy, who had repeatedly called for stable prices and wages as part of a program of national sacrifice during a period of economic distress, held a news conference on April 11th, 1962, which he opened with the following commentary regarding the hike in steel prices. Read Kennedy's remarks carefully, then write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies President Kennedy uses to achieve his purpose. Support your analysis with specific references to the text. So, over here, we're going to start with some of the basic information that you guys are used to filling out when you are looking for Soapstone or SpaceCat or whatever mnemonic device you've been working with. Title. The title for this piece doesn't have one. It's a speech from a news conference. So we don't need to create one. We can just put a couple of lines there. The author, we know, is President John F. Kennedy. And let's make sure we're spelling things right. We've got the period after the F in his name. And that we're using appropriate capitalization. The genre, this is a speech at a news conference. The speaker is the same as our author here, President John F. Kennedy. And our audience. In this one, we have two different audiences. We have an audience of the American people, and we have an audience of steel executives. Okay? And I think this is really important to note because these audiences both kind of touch on the two different purposes that Kennedy has in this speech. Exigence to add to thesis. Over here in this next box, there's a section to add some exigence to the thesis, and this is more information that's going to come from the prompt, okay? What other background information do we need to have to understand what's going on in this passage and what is causing the speaker to make this passage at this time? So some details that I think we need to add are the date and the time to set the context. We need to know that it's the 1960s. It's April 11th, 1962 to be specific. We need to know that the U.S. is emerging from a recession. And we need to know that the nation's largest steel companies raised their prices by 3.5%, because all of these are relevant to why Kennedy is making this speech on April 11th, 1962. Over in this next box, command and conquer. This is a way, again, that Tim Freitas has framed thinking about the prompt from the College Board and how you can write your thesis statement to answer this. The command part is what is the College Board telling you to do? So again, if we go back over here, what I've highlighted in purple, write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies President Kennedy uses to achieve his purpose. That's our command, okay? Our conquer, what can't I know from the command until I've read the essay? So what can't I know is what does he actually want from his audience, and then how does he do it, okay? So what does he want from the American people? What does he want from his secondary audience of the steel executives? And then, moving on from there, how does he achieve those things? Answers to the conquer. In order to analyze what his purpose is, we need to look at it. What does he want the audience to know? What does he want to inform them of? But then, what does he want to persuade them to do? I think our impulse is often to analyze what does Kennedy want to inform, or what does the speaker want to inform the audience of? But I think in most speeches, speakers want to go beyond informing someone. They want them to take some sort of action after hearing that information. And so that second part is really important. What does he want them to do with this information he's just shared? So We're going to look at this in terms of both audiences, because again, I think that he wants a couple of different things. So what does he want the first audience, the American people, to know? I think he wants them to know that he is on their side and he's aware of the problem. He knows that the increase is a burden, and he wants the American people to know that he's aware of it and he's not happy about it. For the second audience, the steel executives, I think he wants them to know that it's unacceptable, that they should not have raised the prices, and that he is not happy with it. Because if you are a business person, you probably don't want the President of the United States angry with you, especially not publicly. The second part, to persuade, what does he want the audience to do? Again, I think we need to look at both audiences. The American people, I think he wants them to join him in protest of the price increase. And from his other audience, the steel executives, he wants them to ultimately lower the prices. Okay, he wants to persuade them that the president, the people, the United States is against this choice, and he wants them to ultimately walk back that price increase. Textual examples. This is where you're going to start actually looking at the text and figuring out what is Kennedy doing. Freitas really recommends going chronologically through the piece, and I think this is really important. So I would also recommend that as well, starting what does Kennedy open with? Then where does he go from there? How does he conclude? And that's really going to help you, I think, with that line of reasoning and tracing how the passage is developed overall. What I want you guys to think about here in these examples are the choices and strategies and moves he is making, what he is doing, as opposed to what Kennedy is using. And some of your thesis statements I'm still seeing uses, or if you're feeling fancy, utilizes and employs. But all of those things are not effective in communicating how Kennedy is able to persuade the people or the steel executives of what he wants them to do. Because when you say that, you're saying Kennedy uses asyndeton to make the steel executives lower prices. That sentence doesn't logically make sense. Asyndeton isn't going to make someone lower a price. So you need to be thinking about what is he actually doing in order to persuade or communicate that he wants something to occur. So, textual examples. If I'm looking back at the passage, in this first part, what do I think he's opening with doing? He's explaining and setting the context for what the problem is, and he's showing what the increase has been and why it is a problem for the United States. So the first piece of text I'm going to pull is from that first paragraph. Steel prices have increased by $6 a ton, and this is a wholly unjustifiable and irresponsible defiance of public interest. Over here, rhetorical strategy. What is he doing? This is going to match each piece of text I pull. And I'm really going to focus on my verbs here. So when he's telling us this, what is he doing? He's acknowledging the burden faced by many Americans at this time. Okay. And so I have acknowledges, this rhetorical verb highlighted here, because I think it's really critical to notice what are the moves he's making. He's opening by acknowledging the problem that's occurring. Going back to the text, in the next paragraph, he moves on to talk about what is going on in the country and around the world versus what the steel execs are doing. In this one, I saw a lot of people focus on the repetition. And you're right, he's repeating a phrase. We see in this serious hour in our nation's history, when we are confronted with grave crises in Berlin and Southeast Asia, when we are devoting our energies to economic recovery and stability, when we are asking reservists to leave their homes and families for months on end, and servicemen to risk their lives, and 4 were killed in the last 2 days in Vietnam, and asking union members to hold down their wage requests, at a time when restraint and sacrifice are being asked of every citizen, the American people will find it hard, as I do, to accept a situation in which a tiny handful of steel executives, whose pursuit of private power and profit exceeds their sense of public responsibility, can show such utter contempt for the interests of 185 million Americans. Right here, we do see some repetition of when we are. But those aren't super important words. It's not a meaningful phrase, and it's certainly not going to inspire anyone to do anything. And so when I'm looking at this, the evidence here from that paragraph, what I noticed that is actually super important that's going on there is that he is contrasting. Not that he's listing when we are, but he is contrasting the sacrifices made by individual Americans with the greed of the steel executives. Because this is an action that could actually cause the steel executives to reconsider their position. Seeing the words when we are doesn't. Okay, but contrasting by saying, look, here's what everybody else in the country is doing while you are in pursuit of private power and profit, that's a significant moment that's going to potentially, hopefully, make the steel executives look back on it and make a change. The last one I want to look at is toward the end, and there's tons of things in here that we could write about, but the last one I wanted to look at is toward the end, where he talks about the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission are examining the significance of this action in a free competitive economy. And the Department of Defense and other agencies are reviewing its impact on their policies of procurement. And I'm informed that steps are underway by those members of Congress who plan appropriate inquiries into how these price decisions are so quickly made and reached, and what legislative safeguards may be needed to protect the public interest. So I'm going to pull a chunk from there, and I can definitely break this down more when I'm writing my body paragraphs, but I just know that this is something I'm interested in later. And so what is Kennedy doing here? Here he's threatening. He is threatening the steel companies of what might happen if they do not lower prices. Okay, so and I have some typos. So what I'm looking at over here, we have these rhetorical verbs. What does Kennedy do? He acknowledges, he contrasts, and he threatens. Okay, so when we keep talking about doing versus using, these are the verbs that should appear in your thesis and that you'll pull back down into your topic sentences. The last step here in this template is your thesis statement. And again, we're going to use the same template that you guys used when you were revising your thesis statements for the Kennedy speech. This template should look familiar to you. And we're going to just pull information down from up here. Okay, you're going to pull who the speaker is, President John F. Kennedy. You're going to pull who the audience is, the American people and the steel executives. And you're going to pull these strategies, these verbs, into your thesis statement. And then these are what's going to become your body paragraph topic sentences later. And they should go in the same order. So, in his speech regarding recent price increases in U.S. steel costs, President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, acknowledges the burden facing many Americans, contrasts the sacrifices made by individuals with the greed of steel executives, and threatens the steel companies in order to inform the American people that the president is on their side and persuade the steel executives to lower the price of steel. One thing you might notice is that I have the inform for both audiences up here, persuade for both audiences up here, and I didn't pull those both down into my thesis. It's a 45-minute essay. I'm probably not going to be able to cover all exhaustively. And I think that my evidence is going to most accurately connect with informing the people that the president is on their side and persuading the executives to lower the price of steel. Because I'll be able to talk about acknowledging the burden, that informs the people, contrasting the sacrifices, that's going to persuade them to lower the price, and threatening them, that's also going to persuade them to lower the price. So this week, you guys will be looking at a new passage, and you will be completing this graphic organizer in order to analyze it and prepare as though you were to write a rhetorical analysis essay on that topic. Thanks so much.